So, hello everybody. I was listening to my dear friends and colleagues' presentations and speeches, and I couldn't think of a better name for this summer school, Painless, because we all are gonna talk about, and we have talked about failures, which is a very painful experience, and how we can render it into a painless experience, learning and accommodating the feedback, etc., etc. So today I will also I'm gonna talk about some realities inherent in the entrepreneurial journey. And in particular, I will talk about challenges that every startup company faces and give you some tools and tips about how to better manage these sort of challenges. So, yeah. Ah, okay. Yes, but we're trying to escape the online sort of interaction and have a face-to-face live interaction with real audience. And again, I'm stuck in front of a camera. This is very controversial. Okay, so I think we're gonna all agree that we live in a brave new world of startups, and there are every day in the headlines news about success stories of startups, and indicative of the above is the accelerated rate of increase for unicorns. Unicorns are private companies which are valued at $1+ billion each. So if you look some years ago, the number of unicorns, how many there were, and how many they are now, and actually this is a bit old data, so now it's even more. I was reading the other day about 10 Greek startups that are about to become unicorns, and we are trying to bring some of these at the college, no, and have some small conference with them. So it's something on the rise, and this is amazing and this is great because we know that entrepreneurship means innovation, means economic growth, means more employment, more jobs for everybody. But what I would like to raise your attention on is that the real story is not exactly the story which is portrayed in the media. What I mean by that, usually we hear that there are some really smart guys that spot a brilliant opportunity and then they work hard, they hire their friends or their classmates from big universities many times, and they build the company using other people's money. And then once this company reaches the status of a unicorn, they sell it, and that's it. In real life, in this sequence of events, there are many fatal setbacks. And actually, the ability of the startup to handle, to manage these setbacks is going to determine the potential of success or failure. To look at some more data, okay, in order to understand the severeness of this issue is if we look, for instance, at a report from Startup Genome, we can see that in a poll, in an investigation of over 3,200 high growth tech startups, the findings showed to us that over 90% of them failed. And what is really surprising, at least at first glance, is that this was not due to the fact that competition was very strong and it outperformed the companies, but it was related to reasons of self-distractions, to reasons that were related to what the companies did, what the founders did. So you realize that a rate of 90+% is a massive rate. And it cannot be a matter of luck. So there should be a sort of pattern. There should be something which is fundamentally mistaken or wrong in the way we approach the building up of a company, of a startup. So As researchers, as academics, our mission is to try to decode, to try to deconstruct what is actually happening and to find the real reasons behind this massive rate of failure. And you're going to ask me, how are we going to find all these reasons? And the truth of the matter is the following. In Silicon Valley, the failure has become such a common practice that it's a customary for every founder who shuts down his or her company to write an essay in order to describe what went wrong. This is really important for the community so that the same mistakes are not repeated again and again, and there is substantial learning happening in this community. So, according to an analysis of the top reasons, okay, that make startups fail, I think Yorgos can resonate with many of these reasons, okay, judging from his presentation. Okay, you can see that sometimes the team was not right. Okay, other times they ran out of cash. Other times they got pricing or cost issues. The product was rather poor, or they had to pivot and they didn't, or they did their own pivot, or maybe the location was bad, or there was a bad coordination and agreement with investors, or they didn't use at the right time the right people to get advice from, etc., etc. But what is really striking and surprising is that the most frequently cited reason for failure is, as you can see, no market need for the product that you have spent countless hours to figure out and build. And this finding, at first seems really crazy because it is self-evident and it is very obvious. If there is no need, if nobody is willing, and if nobody needs what you are building, why do you expect to succeed? This is crazy, right? And yet, this is the number one reason for failure. So, in academia, when we see a sort of a paradox or something very controversial that we cannot really make sense of, what we do is to take one step back and try to see what our assumptions are, what our hypotheses are, and how we have initially made sense of the problem. And this is what we will do today together. So, we will start trying to understand how we define the entity of a startup. What is really a startup? Okay. For many people, a startup is just a small tech company which employs less than 100 people. And the old formula, the traditional way to think about building a startup is start, first of all, to build, to create, to craft a well-thought business plan. Okay, and George said about the importance of a business plan. This is something that we teach in a very meticulous way, all our students, how to build, a robust business plan. And the issue is that in every business plan, the market analysis is a very important section that we spend a lot of time and invest energy to build it. So the question is, since the business plan has as a section the market analysis, how is it possible that we end up creating a product that nobody needs with a lack of a market for this product? Okay, so we're going to see how this happens. So initially, the way we understand a startup is built, we create a business plan, then we pitch this business plan to investors. Okay, then once we have raised money, we assemble the team, we work, okay, on our plan, and then we introduce the product and we start selling as hard as we can. The basic assumption behind all this logic is the following one. It is that we imply that we can know and figure out upfront all the unknown of the business. We can anticipate the majority of what is going to happen. But we're going to see that living and operating in an extremely uncertain environment, this is not always possible. So if we look at more elaborated definitions of startups, what is a startup? And I'm going to start from the third definition. A startup is a company working to solve a problem where the solution is not obvious and success is not guaranteed. So the dimensions that are brought forward is the fact that the solution is not completely clear and the success cannot be guaranteed because, I go to the second definition, there is a lot of uncertainty, extreme uncertainty and novelty. Okay, a startup introduces something technically wise which is very novel, very new. And if we move to the first definition that says that a startup is a temporary organization designed to search for a business model which is, I will explain what is a business model, a business model which is repeatable and scalable. Okay, and this is in contradiction with what existing companies, small, medium, or large, are doing, which are usually executing a fixed, relatively known business model. So, the key to understand why this massive rate of failure happens is experienced by the vast majority of startups, okay, has to do with their inability to understand that a startup is substantially different from an existing organization, which means that the startup does not execute a fixed model, but the startup is searching, is experimenting to find a business model which can produce in a consistent basis sales and can also grow, can guarantee scalability. Okay, so what is a business model? The business model is a device that we have, a concept that we have that explains how value is created for a specific type of customer, how this value is delivered to this customer, and how this value is captured and monetized into profit. Okay, so the business model answers, what do you offer to the customer? Okay, what is the specific benefit that you deliver to the customer? And this is something that you need to have very, very clear in your mind, especially people who have a technical background and deal with technical solutions. And why I'm saying that? Because a product which is technically superior from other alternative products in the market does not mean that it adds value to the life of the prospective customer, of the prospective consumer. To put it simply, if the customers can do equally well their job with the technology, the device that they currently have, there is not one chance in a million to switch and bear the risk of a new product or a new device if they are happy with the one they currently have. Okay, so it's very, very important when we craft our business model to be very, very clear about what is the benefit, what is the value, what is the superior value that we deliver to our customer. And in order to be able to define the value, we need to know our customer very, very well. Who is this customer, the demographics of the customer, the habits, the preferences, okay, in order to create something that he cannot live without. On top of that, we need to be very, very clear about the value chain. How do we build this value? What are the resources and what are the processes and what are the partnerships that we need in order to create this value? Okay, and for sure we need to clear up in our mind what is the revenue model. How are you gonna get paid? Are we gonna get paid through subscription, through patent licensing, through one payoff? How are we gonna get paid? We are lucky enough to have this tool, which is called the Business Model Canvas, that very, very nicely summarizes just in one page all the building blocks that I just described to you earlier on. So we start from the value proposition. What is the superior value that you deliver? Customization, lower cost, convenience, good value for money, superior performance, superior design, more status. What is the value that you deliver? For whom? Which are the specific customer segments that you are targeting? And we need to be very, very specific which are the most profitable segments for us to target. Then, customer relationship. How do we attain, how do we keep the customers, and how we grow these customers, this customer base? This is questions that we need to know the answers very, very well in our mind. Then we have to answer the question, which are the channels that we're gonna use in order to reach the customers, which are the channels which are mostly valued and preferred by these specific customers. Okay, the revenue streams. What are the revenue streams? Are we going to have one revenue streams, many revenue streams? Okay, and how can they be combined? So whatever we have described has to do with the demand side of the business model, but there is also the supply. And the supply has to do with the resources, the processes, the cost structure, and the partnerships that we need to make in order to build this company. And you know that at the beginning, it's very, very important to keep the cost down. So to the extent that we can outsource or form partnerships in order to have access to specific resources is extremely important. So now that it is clear what it is a business model, we can go back to the definitions, okay, of what is a startup and understand even better the gist, the core of what a startup is. So I repeat and I explain, a startup is a company which is a temporary, it is not established yet, which is in the search of a viable, repeatable, and scalable business model. When we say it is in the search, that means we don't have the business model canvas with all these 9 building blocks fixed. We are experimenting and we are playing different scenarios and we are combining different building blocks of the business canvas in order to check which of these scenarios seems to be more promising in order to get the results that we wish to get. Okay? And the thing and the key lesson, is that apart from the product development, in parallel, we need to experiment with the business model and, in a way, learn how to develop our customers. And there is a book related to that, which is called The 4 Steps to Epiphany, How to Create Products That Kill, That Win, by Steve Blank. And this guy is considered a guru in Silicon Valley. So he talks about the customer development phases. And he says that there are 4 phases that every startup needs to be aware of. And execute and follow these phases in parallel to product development. So these 4 phases are a complement to the product development. They are not one way or the other. They are not mutually exclusive, but they need to happen simultaneously. So initially, the phase number 1 is the customer discovery. It's very, very important to identify our market, the number 1 reason for failure, lack of market. So before we do anything, before we write a line of code, okay, we have to understand what is our market. So this cannot be happen with us just sitting on a desk and just writing down a business plan. What I mean by that, the business plan is useful in many respects, but it is like a research activity, a research exercise, which happens in a sort of isolation from the external work. It happens at a desk. So it's extremely important, once we craft what are the 9 building blocks of our plan, of our model, the building blocks of our business model, it's very, very important to go out and interview customers and interview people who will have interesting stories and views and points to share with us with respect to our business model, with respect to the hypothesis and the assumptions that we have made. So the number 1 task of a startupper is to validate the hypothesis, the assumptions upon which his or her business model is built. Because what we perceive as reality is not necessarily the reality itself, and it's all a matter of perception. So we have to go out and test, okay, and validate the hypothesis about what is the market, what the market needs, what is the value that the market mostly prioritizes. And usually the advice that we give, okay, to students and startuppers is not to go out and ask questions. Would you buy this product? Would you like this feature? Because, most frequently people say yes, because they don't have a reason to say no. On the other hand, you really need to do what? You really need to give them scenarios and see how they play or how they react to these scenarios, or give them what we call minimum viable product. I'm going to talk a bit about this. Usually, minimum viable product refers to a sort of prototype or to a sort of product with the minimum most necessary features for the product to work. But if we look at it in a more wider way, we can say that the minimum viable product can also be anything, even a mock-up, even a drawing. I give it to potential customers, to potential early adopters, and I'm trying to get feedback and check what they like the most or what they don't like, or other aspects and features that I have never thought of and they are very important to them. So what is very, very important, and when the first phase stops, is when you have validated, you have tested the business model, the assumptions, the hypothesis of the business model, and you have identified your early adopters. So at the beginning, you don't go for the big market. At the beginning, you only go for creating something for the early adopters. Early adopters are your potential customers, and in particular, they are people who have a need, who have a problem. They are aware of the problem, because I may have a problem, but I may not know it. The early adopters are people who have a problem, are aware of the problem. They seek actively a solution to their problem. They have a timetable about when they want to reach this solution. to this problem, and they have also a budget, and they are willing to pay in order to solve this problem. So all the work, all the interaction, all the interviews, okay, has to do with interacting with the early adopters and, in a sense, asking them to help you through the feedback that they provide, to help you change and adjust and make the idea of your product perfect. Okay? Then in the second phase, you actually go and you don't just test qualitatively your product idea, but you do some early sales. So you actually try to sell, okay, your product and your minimum viable product to guarantee that you have already some sales, and these sales are repeatable. It is not one sale off. So once you do that, you have validated the customers. You know that there are customers who are willing to buy. If there is no interest, and if at the end of the day, no matter what they said during the interviews phase, people are not willing to buy at the price that you have charged, you have to pivot. You have to go back and change your business model and your assumptions and play with the different cells of the business canvas, the business model canvas, the building blocks, okay, till you come up to another combination of revenue streams and customer relationship and value proposition and activities and processes and partnerships that will work. And then you have to go again back and try to sell again and see, will there be any interest in actually buying? So you don't give it for free. You have to make sure that they will buy. And once you have made sure that people, the early adopters, are willing and do buy what you have created at a minimum, okay, sort of feature level, then you move to the third phase, which is the customer creation, where there you start targeting wholeheartedly your market. You start building the demand. You invest a lot in marketing techniques, in promotion. You approach the right influencers. You craft the message in a way that is completely appealing and tailored to your customer base. And you start selling as much as you can. And then at the last phase, which is the customer building, you move from this kind of informal learning and very transient temporal sort of organizational structure to a much more formal structure with clearly delineated roles and functions and etc., what we typically teach in business schools. So the thing is, you realize that before it's the complete opposite of what we do with the business plan. In the business plan, before we execute the idea, before we secure the funding, we have described exactly what's going to happen. Okay, with this approach, okay, we go step by step and we explore if our assumptions and hypotheses are valid. And we do this like ethnographers. We go in the field and collect data and go back and reflect upon the data and then go back again, and then we sell. Because if you don't sell, you can never know if they will actually buy. So we test real behaviors. Okay, and according to what we get as a feedback, we adjust, we make changes, we make improvements, and we end up building something that the market needs, is willing to pay for. And we maximize the chance of success like that. So this is in contrast, a contradiction to what we know: build it and they will come. things do not work like that. Okay, we have the customers as our business partners, and we work along with them to create something which is going to be really meaningful to them. So, um, to wrap up, the takeaway is to make sure that you have summarized the assumption of your business model using the business model canvas. The business model canvas is a very handy, very useful tool because just in one page, you can at a glance check all the various elements and how they are interconnected, integrated, and interlinked, which is extremely important. And you can play around with different scenarios. Second, very, very important tip and advice, get outside the building to test those assumptions, take feedback from real customer and sell. You know that we used to say this story to business schools, and foreign students like it. Onassis, which is famous all around the world, before he was building a ship, he was making sure that he has all the money because he could describe anything, it's everything in a great detail, and they were buying the idea and they were providing the money, prepayment. Okay, it's very, very important to revise your assumptions drawing on the feedback you get from the customers. Okay, and you keep in mind that the product development does not happen in isolation to the customer development but in parallel. Okay, I told you that the minimum viable product is not only a prototype or a product with few, just the absolutely necessary features, but it can be anything that can facilitate your learning from the customer with the least possible cost. And something, a takeaway to accompany you, okay, at the end of the day, and to take with you, okay, from this talk, is that you will get all you want in your life if you manage to help enough other people to get what they really want. But to do that, you really need to be able to understand these people. So I think I was on time. Thank you very much. I look forward to hearing your questions.
Thank you very much, Katerina. I think you proved in the best possible way what George said before, that entrepreneurship can be taught. It's not a myth. Okay.
Yes. There are several lessons.
I think there were some very important messages there and tips. Any questions from the audience? Yes, Nitin.
Hi, ma'am. Thanks for the presentation. So I think in the business model which you presented, identifying the customer is actually let's say the seed of your company. So it takes a lot of time, as you said, like to go interview people.
Yes, it takes time.
So what I thought is, okay, maybe it sounds really cruel. I mean, why can't we create a need? For instance, am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. For instance, in India, till 2015, we were actually really using a mobile broadband for 1 GB per month. So paying, let's say, €5. And in 2017, a new company introduced a mobile broadband, and they gave the broadband free for every customers for 6 months. Okay. So every young fellows and everyone was just running behind that. And okay, I was also a customer. So I thought, okay, I would take this SIM and I will use it for 6 months. Okay, then I will throw it away. So that was my plan. So I also went, and it was really easy, and I got a SIM and I started using it. And after 6 months, I know I have to throw it away, but I couldn't because I get really used to this thing, and then I couldn't.
Yeah.
So what it did is eventually actually two mobile operators had to merge in order to sustain the market. Like there was like Vodafone and Idea network, and now it is called as Vodafone Idea. So this actual new company, actually they actually got a monopoly in the market. They actually create a need for the customer. Actually, they didn't go and interview the customers, and they didn't waste the time and everything. But I know it's actually a huge investment.
Not necessarily, because it always depends on the type of the product.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay,
I mean,
how new the product is and how different it is from the competition. If the competition is very acute and you cannot very easily differentiate what you are doing unless somebody experiences that, okay, then it's up to you to decide if you are going to give it for free in order to hook them up.
yeah,
You know what I mean?
yeah, what I wanted to ask you,
Yeah.
like, okay, here there is a big risk because you are actually investing a lot in the beginning, like giving all the customers free service for 6 months is a huge investment. Like, is there a business model to study? Like, I mean, is it really a reasonable thing, or how long should I give it free for customers so that I could earn a profit after 5 years or something? Is there any?
This is part of the promotion. What you are asking, it is part of the launching strategy.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, this is related to how you are going to create demand, because this is a marketing trick, sort of. So it depends how you have crafted the assumption of the business model, because a part of the business model has to do with the cost structure and the revenue stream. It has to do with the cash flow, how you can stay afloat for how long if you make such a huge investment and you give it for free. So you need to work out the mathematics and play around and see what it is work and what it is not and for how long. And for sure, whatever you do, you need to have an eye on what the next move of the competition is gonna be. Okay? Because if somebody does something very similar, all your investment may be wasted. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There is no a golden rule or a recipe for success. The key lesson is to do baby step, to act as an ethnographer and try to understand the beat of the market, the beat of the competition, and move and adjust and make a lot of iterations. Okay, be able. The Dean of Alba said, "Fail fast." George talked about all these sequence of failures. So the idea is how you can learn from an anticipated factor that was not exactly uh, at your favor. How do you deal with that? So nobody can say give it for 6 months for free or 8 months. It depends. It depends on all these 9 blocks. It depends on the competition. It depends on the state of the economy and many other factors that you need to take into account. Okay, but always doing marketing research. And there was a study by the MIT Leadership Center, and they had studied what is so special about the most innovative companies all over the world. So they observed and they found that all the CEOs, all the leaders of these companies act as ethnographers. They go out and they make questions and they talk to competitors' representatives, to customers, to suppliers, to industry observers, to journalists. They talk and talk and talk and they collect data, and they expect every person in the company to do the same in the area of his or her responsibility. So this is the takeaway, that something which is technically amazing or very sophisticated cannot guarantee success, because at the end of the day is how valuable the customers perceive it. And we have so many biases in the way we understand reality, in the way we understand our position in the reality, that how we're gonna react, okay, to a new stimulus, to a new product, to whatever, it depends. And our ability to be very alert and open-minded and ready to change, not stick to something and try to force it to the market, is extremely important. They say that there is no any product in the world that will survive the first contact with the customer. Okay, one way or the other, you need to make adjustments. The sooner you make the adjustment and the sooner you realize, you become aware of how important this is, the more chances for success you have. And again, there is no guarantee. It's a very volatile world, very uncertain, full of risks. Luck matters, but luck by itself cannot guarantee success. Execution matters a lot. And something else that many technical guys ask me is, how am I gonna share all these secret information, my pattern for what I want to create. And I'm afraid, especially in Greece, every time they ask me, they're gonna steal my idea. And I say, oh, for God's sake, they're gonna steal your idea. You have to make interviews and try to get feedback on the what. What is the need? What is the problem? What is the solution? What else you need? The how, the execution, it remains in closed doors. You know what I mean? So
Excellent. So I guess those guys are doing well still, right? Excellent. Yeah, amazing. Any other questions in the room? I think we have a question. Yes, Marco.
I wanted to ask, how do you, I've asked about capital before, but how do you actually sort out all the, I would call it bureaucracy side of things? So like sort out the taxes and like if you're
you hire a specialized accountant. Or to be honest, there are, in all countries, there are accelerators, there are hubs. Okay, also here with Kostadinos, we aspire to do something similar. So people who have bright ideas, where do they go to get advice about sorting out all the legal details and administrative, bureaucratic details about how to launch, how to start a new business? So there is much help from the state and many other organizations, even banks, hubs, accelerators that are willing to support people in their first steps to start a company. There is help as long as you go out and start looking for information. You have to go out. You cannot, for us, for researchers, this is a life-changing sort of experience to some extent, because after some point we are so much into theory and into books, and we get in love with our theories and we tend to forget what is happening outside. You really need to go outside and look for information. There is much information and there are people who are willing to help. And consider that there are VCs for very early stage companies. Okay, they help you even find a team member. Okay, if you have a very good idea and you don't have the right partners to develop it further. There are VCs that specialize about companies that are in the growth stage. So out there are many useful resources and people to help, as long as you are willing to go out and start searching. Okay.
And we'll hear about from VCs for early entrepreneurship and later
in
later in the program.
Later on today.
Great. We had some question in the chat. Can we hear it, Mohammed?
Yeah.
Hi, ma'am. Thank you so much for enlightening us with the beautiful thoughts and yes, needful thoughts, of course. And you pretty much explained all the slides. There is one question by Yanis Vetsikas. It's, I think, from your slides. Maybe if you go a bit back, and then I would be able to.
This?
Yeah, this one, I think. So he actually wants to know what is the pivot that you mentioned. And he asked for some examples.
What is the pivot?
Yes. And he wants to know some examples as well. He says that a lot of companies failed at that stage based on the slide that was shown. So if you can give some examples.
I didn't understand. Many companies
failed because failed at that stage. So where the pivot is.
Yes, many people fail in the pivot stage because they did the wrong pivot. We saw that if you look at the key reasons, okay, you can see some the pivot gone bad, or they didn't pivot at all. So this is also an area that can go wrong. What does this mean? The pivot has to do with your ability to interpret correctly the data that you collect, the feedback that you have collected from the early adopters. Okay, so if you have not understood them correctly, again, what we are going to suggest as a solution to the problem is going to be wrong. So there should be another pivot and another pivot and another pivot till you get it right. It is not one one way off. This is a continuous process because you check again and again and again. It's like when you have a discussion with somebody on a very, very hot topic, you really need to make sure that the other person who has in front of you really understand what you mean. And you need to say that you need to say this in different words and explain and provide examples to make sure that he or she gets it right. So pivot has to do with your ability to accommodate changes according to the feedback received. And this is not a straightforward process because it's how you make sense of the data. Okay?
Very good.
So the advice is, okay, to maximize the success rate of the pivot, interview as many people as you can and give them scenarios, give them something to react upon and measure and observe their reactions, not only their sayings, to make sure that the assumptions upon which the business model is built are valid. Okay?
Thank you very much, Katerina. Just reminds me, final word before the break. I know we've been delaying the coffee break. I had a friend at Stanford who was doing his PhD in construction management. Okay. And there was a good 6 months or so in his PhD where all he was doing, he was going out interviewing people, and I could not comprehend that. I mean, man, is that a PhD? What you're doing? This is not a PhD. You're going out there talking to people.
Exactly.
But of course, that's exactly what you need. It was a management PhD, construction management. Okay, so of course he did very well later in life. So thank you very much, Katerina. Let me thank all speakers from this morning's session. I think it was great. And let's have the coffee break, and maybe in the background we can play. So our students have made, there was a video competition, and they we have 5 different teams of our students who were asked to put together some videos about their work, and one of them is the winning video. So we'll play it in the background for you guys also get an idea of what we're doing. So we'll come back at 12:05, okay, for the afternoon session. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you.